Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hi, everybody. So I'm excited to bring you today's episode with Cindy Beers. Cindy is a really amazing mental health advocate, and she offers a wide array of yoga and meditation tools for people with trauma, anxiety, and depression. She is a military veteran and a trauma survivor herself. Towards the beginning of this interview, she briefly shares two of those experiences. We did not talk about them in graphic detail here, but I still think it's worth giving a heads up for any listeners that might be sensitive to this kind of story. So you might want to read her bio on the website and then skip ahead from this intro to about the 12-minute mark of the podcast if you feel this might be triggering for you. You'll be well past that part of her story if you start around 12 minutes. And you'll be able to hear more about her incredible work and the new Yoga for Mental Health program that she's starting. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode. And before we jump into it officially, how's it going with your patience and persistence practice? This is our deeper dive topic for January, and there's a worksheet that I sent out about it, and I'm going to send it again in my email this week. So if you haven't got it, you can sign up for that and receive the worksheet to explore patience and persistence. I did an Instagram survey the other day, and it looked like from the survey, it was pretty overwhelming that more people were finding that they needed patience in 2022 so far, as opposed to persistence, which was interesting. It was like 2/3 patience over persistence. That says something probably about kind of how things are right now. But we always need the both. And the trick is that we balance patience and persistence together. This week, I'm going to be sending a meditation around patience in the email newsletter. So if you'd like to receive that, just go to my website at movedtomeditate.yoga and make sure you're on my email list, and that'll come out this week sometime. I'm also getting ready for my next yin yoga teacher training. It starts pretty soon, February 12th. And what we do is we meet on 4 Saturday mornings over February and March. So it's like four-hour training sessions live on Zoom. So it is all online, and we have the Zoom meetings, but there's also pre-recorded lessons that you do on your own time and some readings and homework and practice that you do at home to integrate. So it's kind of a blend of a live and an on-demand or at-home self-paced training. I do teach yin yoga definitely through an accessible yoga and yoga therapy and trauma-informed lens, which is fairly unique. And you will learn in this training how to use props to make these poses more sustainable. We go into a lot of anatomy, the energetic system that's drawn from Chinese medicine, and lots of mindfulness, which, as you know, if you've listened to this podcast, is a huge passion of mine. So if you're interested in checking out the training, all the details are at movedtomeditate.yoga/trainings. And of course, all of my other programs and offerings, the email list where you can get the worksheets for deeper dives and meditations and podcast show notes, all of that stuff is on the website at movedtomeditate.yoga as well. So please enjoy this episode with the inspiring Cindy Beers. Welcome back, everybody. So today we have an exciting episode with Cindy Beers. I'm really excited to talk to Cindy. I learned about her work through someone who took my training program last year and who is now teaching alongside Cindy in her program. So shout out to Heather. Thank you for making this connection. And it's going to be fun to learn from Cindy today because she is a really powerful teacher in what she's doing with her yoga knowledge. So I'm going to give you a little bit of her bio and background before we let Cindy give us some more info from her side of things. But so here's what's in her bio a little bit. Cindy Beers is a mission minded entrepreneur responsible for founding, designing, and establishing a successful yoga business that creates a place for people of all ages and body types to practice yoga and mental health techniques in a safe, inviting, and authentic environment. Cindy spent 18 years in the U.S. Armed Forces and has a special understanding for teaching yoga and mental health practices to veterans, teens, and adults living with anxiety, depression, trauma, and stress. She is also a dedicated educator with over 13 years of teaching experience at the university level. She's a skilled spokesperson, corporate liaison, and mediator with extensive experience working on hundreds of private and public sector contracts. And her bio says, after having experienced a near death episode, Cindy views life as a gift and unabashedly lives it with zest, love, and quirkiness. She has published 2 books, Mindful Yoga for Teen Anxiety and Mindful Yoga for Adult Anxiety, and is currently working on her 3rd title, Yoga for Mental Health. And she's created these amazing training programs for individuals and professionals, the Mental Health Toolbox and Yoga for Mental Health. So she's a very busy lady, traveling around training people, doing speaking engagements, and creating all these online tools and resources for people to use. So, Cindy, welcome. Can you tell
Hi.
us a little bit more about your background? And can we start with like your service in the military and like you were in the military and where did you serve? What did you do in the military?
Well, that's all a great questions. So, I went into the military actually January 19th, 1982. Um, I was um, I was in college. I was getting my associate's degree, and crazy thing, I found I found my boyfriend in bed with another woman. So 3 days later, I was gone. I went in the military.
Wow.
I I know. So I had my job in the military was an airfield manager, and we worked in base operations, airlift control elements, and what our job was um, doing flight planning, in inputting flight plans to the FAA. Weather, monitoring the ground level of the airports and the air bases for airplane movements, moving things, moving planes from one place to another and whatnot. My job. I was in what was called an airlift control element, and what we did is we went into what we called austere places, and these are places that had dirt runways in the middle of nowhere, and we went all over the place, all over the world, and these are places I some of them I still can't talk about because they're classified.
Mm.
But let me regress back, and this is one of the reasons that I do what I do. uh, After I got out of basic training, I went to a tech school in Illinois. It's since closed. It was used during World War II, and then they moved it to a training base and whatnot. So I was working an air show where we had airplanes come in from all over the United States, and they had displays and whatnot. And I was in charge of this one air crew of 6 men that brought in an airplane. It's a huge airplane. It's called a C-5 Galaxy. So anyway, one night after the air show was done, they wanted to thank me by taking me out to dinner, and they put something in my drink and drugged me and proceeded to have their way with me.
Hmm.
And I was unconscious. So I had a sexual assault in the military back in '82,
Wow.
and then fast forward, and back in that time, you never talked about these things. Because if you did, you would be charged with an Article 15 and be kicked out. So
What's an
basically, if
Article
I
15?
Okay, that's part of the Universal Code of Military Justice, or Uniform Code of Military Justice. And what that is, it's a failure to repair, and what that means is failure to conform to military standards. So if I would have reported it, I would have been the one that got kicked out.
So major
So
victim blaming.
pretty much.
Wow.
They're doing huge changes right now. It's late, but at least they're doing changes, and we're grateful for that.
Hmm.
So I never talked about it. Never talked about it. Fast forward to what I did in the military, and so I was in some places, like I said, that were classified. And this was during the Reagan administration, and we were down in South America. I can't tell you where, and we were doing an airfield survey off the coast in a small island I can't say. And this was during the Contras and the Sandinistas and everything. So we landed there from a helicopter, and we started doing the survey. Long story short, we got captured and were held for 8 hours. So as
Whoa.
you could see, there was a lot of buildup of PTSD in my life. So fast forward to 2016, I was approached by one of my colleagues who had a daughter who had horrible anxiety.
Mm.
Um, and I was in the midst of all my yoga practice, being a yoga teacher and working on myself. And so my colleague's like, "Can you help my daughter?" I'm like, "Sure. Let me see what I can come up with." So I got together with a psychologist by the name of Tom Fink. He's a great psychologist. He is the developer of Mind Reflector, and
Mm.
so he's not a dumb guy. So between the both of us, we put together this great program for this young lady, and it worked. So I'm like, let's see if
Hmm.
this can work on adults. So yeah, sure as heck, it did. So during this time frame, my husband was the one that started saying, and I had shared with my husband, because I took a teacher training on on military sexual trauma,
Mm.
and and it triggered all of it back,
Of
all of it. I mean, I
course.
had
Oh my
suppressed it.
gosh.
I like squashed this stuff down, and never ever talked about it. So about 3 years ago, my husband's like, "You really need to say something to somebody." So I said, "Well, who's going to believe me? I have no proof." So one day I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I went to the VA, filed a claim, and with the VA, anything like this that has to do with psychological trauma, they have you go through a psych eval, which
Hmm.
is anybody that has PTSD or trauma or anxiety. This is scary. So I did go. It was probably one of the greatest experiences that I had, which is even shocking for me to say, but it was because I got teamed up with a forensic psychologist. I I went through everything that I just said, because I would never even say these things out loud.
Yeah.
So I told him everything, and he goes, "Well, this all makes sense." And I go, "What do you mean?" Well, he had my military medical records up, and he linked everything in my military background, including my two failed marriages, back to that first incident. It was
Wow.
mind boggling. And so I was so grateful to this gentleman, and I'm
Mm.
still grateful for him,
So
not because
validating.
it was just absolutely validating. And because of all that is why I do what I do. Because the Yoga for Mental Health program and the Mental Health Toolbox is an ever evolving and growing
Mm.
program, where I'm searching out not just new and exciting things within the terms of yoga, but holistic modalities that actually do fall under the term yoga.
Hmm.
Because as you know, The term yoga goes back to the word yoke, of putting on the collar on the horse for the carriage or the chariot, and
Mhm.
having that mind body union. And this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. This is about having to feel from the neck down, matching your insides to your outsides, and making things happen.
Wow. Thank you, Cindy, for sharing all of this with us. You've had some really intense experiences. And I think that, even what you're sharing is probably just a piece of it. But I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so beautiful and so incredible and admirable that you're able to take these like adverse experiences and turn them into something that's useful and helpful to others. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone has to be able to do that, but it's amazing that you can. And I just really admire that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
incredible. I'm curious about, you gave us a little bit of like your kind of professional history and your military history, but at what point did yoga and meditation come into your story?
Well, it started about, I had taken yoga bits and pieces throughout my adult life. It wasn't until about 2009. I was very, very ill. I had fibromyalgia. I had chronic fatigue. I was really sick. I It got to the point that I had to work from home because there were days I could not get up out of bed. There was days I couldn't even function. So I I met this absolutely remarkable doctor by the name of Andre Garabedian, who's out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, who's one of the leading researchers next to Jacob Teitelbaum on fibromyalgia.
Hmm.
So he the it, I went to him, and one of the things he told me is, if you listen to me, I can help you and fix you. I'm like, done. you know so I did. I listened to him, and one of the things that he told me was, start doing yoga.
Huh.
And I said, okay. And I said, I've done it before. And I said, I just need to find the right teacher. It's like, okay, fine. So I did. I started doing it, and I can't tell you how many tears I shed on my mat, just letting go, for lack of a better term, the shit show in my brain that was
Hmm.
going on, because I was ready to give up, and I knew how to do it. Pills and booze, I was set to go. I knew I
Mm.
needed to do this, and yoga got me out of that,
Wow.
because I knew at the time my daughter was young, and I didn't want her to go to her abuser father, and I had to stay, and I was just married for only 5 years to my husband, and I'm like, "I've got to fix myself."
Hmm.
So, going on the mat, shedding those tears, getting past this. Then after that, starting with yoga, then I got in touch with this gentleman by the name of Joshua O'Brien, who taught mindfulness-based stress reduction,
Hmm.
MBSR. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to jump in both feet. Let's see what happens. And that got me on a total change of life. I mean, it was like an immediate left turn. Yoga started me on that turn, and MBSR took me there. And
Wow.
so I started on this quest of finding different meditations that were going to fit not just my life, but the people I encounter. So I'm like, there's something to this. So MBSR helped, but with anxiety brain, or the stress brain, or whatever, the brain tends to not want to stop. It just constantly goes and
Hmm.
goes and goes and goes. It's kind of like the hamster on the wheel. So that's where I started searching out different meditations. And what I found was meditations that work for people with brains that don't stop are meditations that have thought process to it.
Hmm.
Like, like transcendental meditation, loving kindness meditation,
Mhm.
of vipassana meditation. These are affirmation based, guided imagery, something that takes the mind and makes it veer away from, again, the shit show of the brain, and helps it calm down
That
and come
totally
into
makes sense.
that stillness. And in transcendental meditation, they talk about not staying on top of the pond, but going down to the bottom of the pond. And that's what happens when
Mm.
when you're working with someone that has anxiety, depression, trauma, or stress, or complex PTSD, or DID, whatever. It helps them relax and have that parasympathetic nervous system come into play.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started on my yoga and meditation um, journey. And I'm still going at it. I'm still going strong and finding new and different ways of meditation. And I
It's
just
so
recently,
vast, right?
oh,
You can keep
absolutely.
going for a lifetime and discover new
Absolutely.
ways.
Oh my God, yes. Right. I'm getting ready. I'm hoping it starts in April, working with UPMC Oncology in their breast cancer division,
Oh,
uh,
fabulous.
and we're doing a study to see what works pre-surgery and post-surgery
Mm.
with a yoga practice and meditations. And what was really awesome with this is I reached out to, I don't know if you know this person, but if you don't, you need to. Belarus Naparstek.
No.
Oh my God, this woman is a rock star.
What's her name
When
again?
it Belarus Naparstek.
Napper stack.
She
Okay.
she is a rock star when it comes to meditations and guided imageries. And she worked with Kaiser Permanente with pre and post surgical meditations. And I
Mm.
reached out to her. I'm like, can I take what you've created and use it? And she's like, heck yeah. The more people that know it, the better. So between her, Richard Miller with iRest, because I took Richard Miller's iRest Yoga Nidra
Mhm.
training, between them and all that, I mean, this is stuff that people need to know about to
Yeah.
help with the hamsters in the brain.
The hamsters. Well, what you said about, having a meditation practice that engages the brain and engages the thinking mind makes so much sense because people often think it's about clearing your mind and not thinking. And this is totally not realistic, especially
Exactly.
if your brain is stimulated by something like anxiety or trauma. So
Right.
giving the mind something to do is
Yeah.
very important. And it's this art of where do we place our attention and how do we learn to
Hmm.
do that skillfully. And
Absolutely.
I am so interested in like you were talking about going into yoga at that time and having such, emotional release through that practice. And it was at a time when there was no such thing as quote trauma informed yoga. Like we had no
No.
awareness of this, or if people did, it was through their own intuition and their own experiences and their own sense of kindness.
Hmm.
But it wasn't like anything that we talked about or that anyone trained in at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm really just curious if there's anything to say about that, how it was for you going into yoga environments early on when you were really just starting to process all of this stuff inside you.
And that's a really good question. And when I first started yoga, teachers didn't understand how to work with people that have anxiety, depression, trauma, or stress, or complex trauma, or anything like that. They just, the teacher that I had just would see me with tears. And as, very smart woman, she just let me go, you know, and she never asked the questions, which is good. That's exactly what a yoga teacher needs to do.
Hmm.
Let that person go and allow them to do what they need to do to take care of themselves.
Don't try to stop it. Don't try to fix
No,
it. Just kind of
no,
hold the space. Let them have their
right.
process.
And that's what the
Yeah.
Yoga for Mental Health and the Mental Health
Mhm.
Toolbox does. We allow the person to have that time. Now, granted, as a compassionate person, I will secretly walk by that person and hand them a tissue. Um,
Mhm.
but as a yoga teacher, it's so important for you to let that person be in that space with themselves and allow them to do that on their own. If they want to share, let them share, but let them have that time.
It's their
And
choice.
right. And what I've done with the Yoga for Mental Health program with the teacher trainings is teach yoga teachers that. Teach them to let that person be instead of sitting there going, "Oh, are you okay? What can I do to help you?" No, don't do that crap. Let them be. My teacher trainings can be looked at as trauma informed, but I prefer it to be mental health informed
Mhm.
because yes, you're learning about trauma. Yes, you're learning about depression and all that, but you need to be mental health informed
Mhm.
because the way that I look at this is trauma, where it stems in the brain, can lead to anxiety, depression, and stress.
Right.
Anxiety can lead to depression, trauma, and stress, and so forth. So it's just this big circle of crap that's
They're all
going
linked
on in the
together.
brain, and they're all linked together. I had a
Yeah.
famous yoga teacher tell me one time, "Well, you need to stick to one," and there's just no way that I
Like, you need to
can.
focus on teaching only one?
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't because it all has to do with the brain. Granted, depression is in the different portion of the brain than anxiety and trauma. And
Mhm.
stress is just a whole different ball of wax. So, it's all the brain per se, and we're learning
Mhm.
more and more every day of where this comes from. And then we bring in the things that Stephen Porges talks about within the
Mhm.
polyvagal theory with the vagus nerve, which even adds more to the peripheral arteries and that we're talking about within the brain and how it stimulates every part of the body.
And it's physiological, it's not just the thoughts, it's not just this, like, ephemeral mental experience that we're having, it's totally physiological, and you cannot separate the mind and the body in that way
Yeah,
and, you know,
you're
hope
right.
to fix anything.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
And with the therapies and the technology that we have out now, there's so many ways of dealing with it. And yes, modern medicine is absolutely phenomenal in dealing with these things. But the things that I teach can be beneficial to those who are on these modern medicines and help move you further into being healthier and mentally healthier
Mhm.
and being mentally well. And recently, I got endorsed by the American Mental Wellness Association, and the executive director and I had a really great discussion about this, about people with mental health issues, whether it's anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar, whatever it is. Seek out and be your best advocate and find the right things that work for you,
Mhm.
medically, holistically, because myself, I've had to be my own advocate
Yeah.
and stand up and put my big girl panties on and fight for myself. And I know other people have done the same, and it's hard, but we have to do it. Right now, I'm still in a battle with the Veterans Administration for my fibromyalgia that is part of the PTSD.
Totally. Yeah,
They think
yeah.
it's two different monsters,
Oh,
and
no,
it's
it's been
not.
shown to be totally linked to trauma, things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia very
Mhm.
often have that, trauma
Yeah.
connection.
Yes, and Bessel van der Kolk has really stepped in and shown that this is how it really works in the
Yeah,
body.
yeah. Well, and good for you for fighting for yourself, but you're also fighting for others. And the way that you
Absolutely.
are working so hard, you are making it easier, forging a path for others who, will come along behind you and maybe have a little bit less struggle with finding what they need and getting these resources. And maybe you've kind of answered this a little bit already, but I was looking at your qualifications and your bio and all your work experience, your education, teaching experience, and your corporate mediation, and all of this amazing stuff. And I was like, wow, Cindy could do anything. She could run for office and we'd vote for her. You could be a therapist, you could be an advocate, like you are. But I was like, why yoga? Why did you choose to like put your energy into these tools when it's something that like our society doesn't necessarily take seriously all the time? It doesn't look at with the same clout as some of these other roles that maybe you could have played. So,
And
you want to speak to that?
that's a really good question. All I could say is I was on antidepressants for 21 years. And how that happened was I back in 1991, I was stationed in California, and we had a very, very huge earthquake. And I s- and and it was in outside of San Francisco. And
Was that the
there
one that
is
disrupted the World Series?
yes,
Oakland. Yeah, I
yes.
remember that.
Yeah, and the Bay Bridge, if folks who don't know, Bay Bridge is a bridge that connects Vallejo, California to San Francisco, and it's a double-decker bridge. Well, that
Hmm.
bridge collapsed on itself, and I
Oh
happened to
my
see it on
God.
TV before we lost electricity. And I'm not thinking anything of it. Just, but internally, it scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
And so when my ex-husband and I retired and we moved to Pennsylvania, one of the things that people don't realize in Pennsylvania is we do have tunnels that are built into mountains.
Mm.
And so it was petrifying. I would like hold my breath and pray that that mountain doesn't fall on me because in my anxiety, panic, disordered brain,
Hmm.
I knew it was going to fall in on me.
Yeah.
So once we established ourselves in Pennsylvania, I was literally on my way to the doctor because of these panic attacks that I was getting. And I got to this one bridge and I had to pull over because I knew that bridge was going to cave in on me. So the doctor at the time came and got me, took me back to his office, wrote out two prescriptions, one for Paxil, one for Ativan. And so I started taking them. Once I started yoga, I really cleared out a lot of what was in my head. So I decided I didn't need this anymore. And so, and this is why I'm a huge proponent anymore. So I weaned myself off it. And if anybody's ever tried to wean themselves off of antidepressants, it's like a heroin addict getting clean.
Mm.
It is that hard. And you can't just stop it. You have to wean yourself off. So anyway, this is where the yoga perspective comes into play and why yoga for me. And I always tell people yoga fixed me because I was able to get the demons out. I was able to work on me through yoga. And once I started doing my 200 and 300 hour teacher training, it even became more evident on how the body and the brain respond to yoga. Because, even when you look at yoga from a physiological perspective, and how it works on the body. It's not a lot of people look at yoga as the workout. It's a great sweat, No, no,
Hmm.
no, no, no. You're totally missing the point here.
So much more.
It's so much more. Psychologically, it works because it helps again, the shit show in the brain. And if we put the perspective of of how Besser Vanderkolk looks at it, of how the body keeps score, it helps clear that out and it helps with wellness.
Mhm.
and getting better. And so when I brought all this back to Dr. Garabedian, who I spoke of, back to him and what I'm finding in my research, he started researching it. And every time he has a new patient coming in, it's one of the first things he tells them to do is yoga. And, I'm so honored that I'm actually going to be teaching for Dr. Garabedian in
Oh,
March.
cool.
I'm going back and doing the mental health toolbox for his patients because of how it's made such a change with me. And granted, yoga is not for everybody.
Mhm.
Some people don't want to get in touch with that part of their body because, to be perfectly honest, it can be frightening,
Mhm.
especially if you have some really bad stuff going on in your life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's other ways of using the word yoga. For example, energy medicine, the emotional freedom technique, havening, self EMDR, meditation, affirmations, all this stuff. You can use that and say the word yoga, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it fits under this bigger umbrella for you, like in your mind of like
Absolutely.
what yoga is and what it's for. And it's not so much the
Absolutely.
techniques or poses or whatever, it's the intention and the
Right.
presence and the effect that it has in
One of the
yoking.
Yes, yes, and if yoga's not your thing, go out and buy the book, and if meditation's not your thing, fine. Go out and buy the book, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. It'll help with your healing.
And that's affirmations, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned havening. You're one of the only people I've heard of who knows what that is, but I actually discovered havening through another person who trained with me, and she's a therapist who works with, uses havening in her practice and works with
Mhm.
someone in Pasadena, California, who's really a havening researcher. And it's
Yeah,
a really cool modality too
yeah,
for trauma therapy and nervous system support, and it's a lot
right.
of like self-touch and like
It
rewiring your
is.
brain, and I
Yep,
really
and
enjoy it.
I took their training and it was really good. And for those of you that don't know who havening is, it's super simple. There's three parts of the body that have nerve endings that are very sensitive. And it's in the hands, the palm, the hands, the sides of the arms, the face, the forehead. And all you have to do, if anything, just sit there and just rub your hands together, not fast, just back and forth, and it's very, very calming.
Hmm.
And that's what I love about it. Self EMDR came my way by watching a documentary on Apple TV, The Me You Can't See, with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle,
Huh.
and there's a great book out there called Self EMDR. It's fascinating, and the reason
And
why
that's
I'm
eye
proponent.
movements, right? EMDR, for people who
Actually,
don't
it's
know.
eye movements and using your hands. And
Okay.
what I like about havening, tapping, and self EMDR is you're doing it on your own. And the
Hmm.
reason why it's better that way, less triggering. Because if you're sitting with someone that they're guiding you through it,
Hmm.
you have a really good chance of getting triggered.
They,
And
because they
that's
don't feel it coming up in you, like they don't know, like you're in the
right.
driver's seat if it's a self
Exactly,
applied.
exactly. And
Hmm.
and I and I had this happen to me when I was going through my havening training. I got triggered and I brought it up to the teacher and I said, this is something you need to bring to someone's attention that this can be triggering. So if you're going to a therapist and they know these modalities, make sure that this is someone you trust with everything in your being
Hmm.
because that is so key because you just can't walk into somebody's office, plop down and go, I want EMDR or I want havening
Hmm.
because you don't know them and you need to establish that trust.
Hmm. You can't do this like deep process with someone unless there's that. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to touch back on, you were talking about how you were able to wean yourself off of the medications, and just to
Mhm.
say like that the medications can be life-saving and very helpful.
Absolutely.
And when we say we're pro yoga, we're not anti-medication.
Absolutely not.
But
I am
yeah.
all for modern medicine
Yes.
because, I mean, I look back, I was born in '62, and I look back, and my mom was a nurse back in the day too. Now, she went through nurses training in the late '40s, and she used to tell me stories about polio vaccines, before polio vaccines, when kids and adults would get polio and they'd be in iron lungs,
Mm,
or, before the smallpox vaccine and the chickenpox vaccine and all those. And I think, modern medicine is so great
mhm,
that we've come so far, especially when it comes to mental health. Uh, there's so many great medications out there, and anybody that is depressed or has anxiety and you feel you need medication, take it and don't stop. And work with a psychologist and a psychiatrist to work through your issues, and be your advocate, work on yourself. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to cry, and you're going to stomp your feet and yell and scream and want to punch things. But
mhm.
it's so important to do that.
Yeah, and then yeah, it's amazing that we can have both. We can have
Hmm.
that support, and then we can learn these kinds of self-healing techniques and yoga practices and meditations, and all of this can give us a lot more tools to have at our disposal to really support this, healing process. So, so I'm curious, like you've said that you've taught teens, you've taught veterans, you live in, a more red state area of Pennsylvania. Do you ever encounter people who have resistance to trying yoga, and you're
Oh,
kind of like, I'm this passionate yogi, and this is going to work for you, and they're not sure. How do you deal with that?
well, that's a really good question. When I come across that, if I come across someone that says, "Yeah, meditation's not my bag," or "I can't meditate," or "No, yoga's not for me," I'll just say, "Well, why?" And I, I get different answers. It's like, "I'd rather go to the gym," or "I think it's hokey," or, "I do my own thing," things like that. How do okay, cool, whatever works for you, man. You know, and people that tell me that they can't meditate, my response is, well, you just clearly have not found the right meditation, because there is over 28 different types of meditations. You just haven't found one that works for you.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe they have found their own thing, but we can like take inspiration and learn from yoga and mindfulness. We could be mindful on the treadmill, we could
Hmm. Absolutely.
be mindful at the gym, we could do that in lots of different ways, if we're open to what that means.
Right.
Yeah. Um, well, so I'm curious about, you have, I think it's a new program online that you're creating for yoga and mental health. And this is what, our mutual connection.
Right.
Heather is involved with you. It looks like it's live online classes that are
Hmm.
specialized, with different teachers. So could you tell us a little bit about this program? What's it called? What is it?
Absolutely. It's called Mental Health, Yoga, and Wellness, and you can type that in exactly the way it sounds.com. And what the Mental Health, Yoga, and Wellness is, it's a program with yoga teachers, mental health practitioners, psychiatrists that are uh, giving workshops and classes and helping everybody try to learn to work with their issues and their tissues. I have teachers that are doing yoga for anxiety. I have teachers that are doing yoga for depression. I have teachers that are doing eye rest, yoga nidra. Um, we're going to be doing support groups. We're going to
Hmm.
be having guest speakers. I mean, we're putting together an advisory board now just for this program
Oh,
that's
cool.
including some pretty major hitters with around the world that we're going to be taking their input, and I'm going to be taking their input and saying, okay, let's do this. And ultimately, I want it to be something that people can go to where they can create, or find programs that fit their lifestyle, not what
Mhm.
I tell them, what they want to find, because it's easy for people like you and I to say, well, try this. Well, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But if you can let them, give them the tools and say, okay, go find this and go find what works for you, that's even better. Um, we talked about the Havening website, or Havening itself, havening.org kind of has that idealism. If you look on their website, they have tons and tons of videos, and it's, anything that you want. And what's nice about it is it's different practitioners giving you different things to work with and help you. And it's like a mall that you can find a teacher that jives with you, and you can follow them.
I think that's great. And, more and more doctors and therapists and people, professionals are recommending yoga to their patients and saying, go try yoga like yours did.
Yeah,
But, I worry sometimes about people just getting the generic word yoga and then not knowing where to go. And they get lost on YouTube, or they go to the wrong class somewhere that's like really
right.
intense or not quite the right fit. So I think it's great that you're creating a mall that's like a safe mall for
Yeah,
people to explore within, that it'll be appropriate
right.
practices. And
And we have it for the Black community, we have it for the BIPOC community, we have it for the gay community, we're
the different
covering.
affinity groups that people can feel
Absolutely.
safe in.
People
Hmm.
that are marginalized, we are trying to get that group. We're inviting in
Hmm.
as many people as want to be there. We want to make sure that we're covering every avenue and every
Hmm.
person within the world.
It's as inclusive as possible.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Um, so you also, I know you train yoga teachers to better understand mental health. And, even if you're a teacher that doesn't specialize in yoga for mental health or anxiety or trauma, what do you think that like any average yoga teacher should know though about mental health, knowing that human beings with their stuff are coming into our classes, and regardless of like the style of yoga or the type of class, like what should every yoga teacher know?
That's a really good question. And my response to that is you could have your yoga class set up and have all the papers ready or have in your mind what you want to do. Feel your yoga students when they walk in the door. Listen to them talking. What are they talking about? What are they feeling? And you can gauge it on that and say, okay, let's switch it up. And I've done this with every yoga class that I've had. I can go in with a plan on what I want to do, but based on what I'm hearing in their conversations, I'll do a 180 and change it up. You know, it's so important for yoga teachers to listen to their students.
Mm,
Listen to them, listen how they talk. Listen to how they're talking to their neighbors. Listen to what they're saying when they walk in. Look at their body language. If they're walking in and their shoulders are shrugged and their head is down, what's that telling you? If they're coming in and you see them maybe rubbing their hand because they have carpal tunnel, or limping, or they're telling you that they have plantar fasciitis, listen to them.
mhm,
This is the markings of a good yoga teacher, when they're listening to their students and not just teaching what they want. If they want to
mhm.
do what they want, fine, do your own practice. But step away of the things that you want and listen to others.
That's beautiful advice. And it's interesting because we can take all these advanced trainings, and we should be as steeped in this knowledge as we can, but then it comes back to our intuition and our human connection and our ability to just observe and yeah, to fall back on those simple human things, but that, are deepened by our training and our practice. So
Mhm.
that's really interesting that that's the answer you give.
Yeah. I just, I'm so passionate about humans and, well, animals per se. And, if I had my choice, I'd probably have 10 dogs right now. But um, beyond that, I care about our fellow man, our fellow humans, and
Hmm.
and I want to make sure that as a human myself, I'm taking not just care of myself and doing self-care for me, but I want to make sure that the human experience alone is something that someone can feel good about.
Hmm.
And when you walk into a now, and I've had this happen, walking into a yoga class and doing a class and being shamed,
Mm.
no, that's not in my book. I want people to feel like when they walk through my doors or open up my Zoom account, that they feel welcomed and loved and cared for
Hmm.
and nurtured, and understanding that it's not just the workout, it's a practice, an ongoing practice of beauty and love for yourself, for your mind, your body.
Well, I can't think of a better note to close on than what you just said. That was wonderful to hear. But I do want to ask if there's anything else you want to add to this conversation about yoga and mental health.
Oh, thank you. So, if you want to look at the program, check us out, mentalhealthyogaandwellness.com.
Hmm.
If you want to check me out, cindybeers.com.
Okay.
You can also check out the American Mental Wellness Association, which has absolutely amazing resources out there. Havening.org, tm.org. I told you, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Fabulous book. There's also a movie that you can get on hayhouse.com. Um, there's tons and tons of resources out there. Do your homework, be your own advocate.
I'll link to those in the on my website when I post this episode, so people can easily find them and link to your stuff too. Are you on social media at all? Do you play
I
on social
am.
media or no?
Do I play? Yeah. Mental Health Yoga and Wellness is on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Uh, there's also a TikTok account called Mental Health Toolbox that I go on and do something every day just to make people
What do
feel
you
good.
do on TikTok? That's so cool.
Breathing techniques. We talk about uh, havening. We talk about tapping,
Oh,
just
cool.
journaling, just things like that. Things that you could do for yourself, and how to create a better life.
Fantastic. I'm gonna have to remember how to log into my TikTok account. I got on there and then I like forgot how to log in and I haven't got on in a long time. And I was like, what is this? So I
Yeah,
love that you are contributing something so incredibly wholesome to it. And I'll have to look you up. That's awesome.
thank you.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to have this conversation and for sharing your experiences and what you do and what you bring into the world. I think it's quite amazing, Cindy.
Oh, thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.